the air navigation service provider for Canada. Nav Canada is the country's private not-for-profit air navigation service provider. Jonathan's teams are responsible for government relations, media relations, stakeholder relations, all sorts of relations on modernisation initiatives, as well as proactive community engagement on airspace change and aircraft noise. He serves as the co-chair of the Industry Noise Management Board, which assesses noise mitigation opportunities at Toronto Pearson Airport, the largest airport in Canada. He sits actually with Rachel and I on ICAO's Committee on Aviation Environment Protection, Working Group 2, and co-leads a task group there, which develops good practice and guidance on community engagement. Jonathan's originally from Montreal, but now lives in Ottawa with his wife and 2 children. Is going to talk to us a little bit about the sustainability framework at NAV Canada. So please welcome Jonathan to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really happy to be here today. I wish I brought my presentation on trajectory-based operations when you ended with that, but this should be tie in well with things. So today what I want to do is talk a bit more about how NAV Canada during the pandemic took a step back and used it as an opportunity to rethink how we look at our business, both in terms of operational change and bringing new initiatives that will support efficiency, environmental performance, noise reduction, but also how we decide to really pursue a very structured framework on how we're going to pursue our goals, how we're going to position our goals, and how we're going to measure them. And so that's what my presentation's about today. I'm going to start off with a short video. I can't promise that there isn't a bit of like a corporate cheese factor in the video, but it's a good overview nonetheless.
At NAV Canada, we're dedicated to keeping Canada's skies safe and shaping the future of air navigation services. We're also mindful of the impact we have on the industry, our communities, and our planet. None of us can prosper in a world with inequality, unrest, poverty, and climate disturbances. And we all have a role to play to help ensure a sustainable future for all. NAV Canada's Environmental, Social and Governance, or ESG strategy is guiding us as we do our part. Our approach to ESG is focused on the principles of environmental action, inclusive society, and strong governance. We're already working to increase flight efficiency and reduce emissions through initiatives like trajectory-based operations and airspace modernization. We're also making sustainable infrastructure choices in both new and current facilities, including energy-saving HVAC systems and sustainable backup power options. NAV Canada is committed to driving employment equity in the air transportation sector, and we take our social responsibilities seriously. Our employee promise is making NAV Canada an even better place to work, while our health and wellness offerings give employees access to important supports and resources. We're also active in our communities, working to reduce noise and giving back through volunteering and fundraising efforts. As the world's first fully privatized air navigation service provider, our governance model holds our management, employees, and suppliers to the highest standards. And as a member of the UN Global Compact since 2022, NAV Canada's CEO and board have made a commitment to operate sustainably and support the UN's Sustainable Development Goals in the years to come. It's an exciting time for NAV Canada as we continue to invest in a sustainable and economically resilient future.
Thank you. So a bit of a feel-good video there and some inspirational music in the background, but it's a good overview because it provides context on, so when we think about, environmental sustainability and climate action, it's taking place in a broader framework for NAV Canada, and that's the ESG framework, environmental, social governance. And we're looking at an approach that takes action at 3 different levels within our company, with our customers, and on the world around us. And to do so, what we did is we obviously looked at what frameworks were out there in the global community, and of course the UN Global Compact, which is basically a commitment by corporations to pursue positive action in a number of areas, including environmental, social justice, anti-corruption, in a number of areas. And there's a total of 17 sustainable development goals that are promoted by the UN Global Compact. So that's our commitment to environmental social governance, and it's supported by a number of other initiatives on the measurement side, including the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and the Science-Based Target Initiative, which tie into the UN Global Compact, and in terms of how we're accountable to measuring our performance in those areas. And so one of those key sustainable development goals is development goal number 13, which is on climate action. And we've taken 2 approaches to pursue this. One is looking at climate action within our own company, and that includes measuring our greenhouse gas emissions as the air navigation service provider. Obviously, we provide service to aviation and to airlines, and we have a role there. That's part of our second approach, but our first approach is to look inwards at ourselves and how the fuels we use for our own fleet, our inspection aircraft, our various vehicles that are on the ground at airports, how we purchase electricity, emissions through our value chain, including purchased goods, services, anything that we acquire. And that's tied into the Science-Based Target Initiative. So it's really about looking at NAV Canada and its own footprint. Our second approach is basically probably the one that has the most potential to have impact, is where looking at our climate action with our customers. And so that's the airlines that rely on our services for routing and flight planning, and working with them to reduce their fuel burn. Kenley had a great slide there that showed the different sources of potential reduction in emissions, and operations was a key one. And from our perspective, we estimate that our role could be as much as 6% of current emissions could be reduced from improved operational procedures from the air navigation service provider. So how we've operationalized that, or made a commitment, at least within Canada, is we're a signatory of Canada's Aviation Climate Action Plan, which is an agreement with the federal government. And the goal there is to pursue a number of initiatives that reduce emissions, including trajectory-based operations, which will drive much more shared information across the industry on what's operationally, how we can reduce, increase predictability, but also reduce our footprint. And a key aspect of this will be how we measure impact. And we're actually working with EnviroSuite. They didn't pay me to say that, because I know they're here. I had it on my slide before that. But working with EnviroSuite on a number of different metrics. And when we talk about measuring operational performance, it's a key enabler for our goals. Obviously, having great goals is one thing. Being able to measure them and prove that you've achieved it is also very critical. And so we have a number of facets to that. One is a strategic integration of the mindset to measure our objectives, and how we use performance data within the organization as part of every project. So it's changing our framework from that perspective, as well as alignment and collaboration with our partners. So when we think of what we want to achieve as an organization and the change we want to deliver, it's going to take a lot of data, and it's a lot of data doesn't just belong to us. So partnerships are critical, and there's a few spaces where we're seeking those partnerships. A key one is the Civil Air Navigation Services Organization, which is the Association for Air Navigation Services globally, and working with them as they've developed a green ATM concept. Also, ICAO Performance Experts Working Group. So we're in a number of spaces that are discussing how we align globally on these metrics. So talking a bit more about measuring operational and environmental performance, what we're looking to do is really, this is a snapshot of a number of metrics that we want to be able to measure as the air navigation service provider. You might be surprised that the industry today doesn't measure a lot of these things in a consistent way. And so our goal is to build the platform, working with our partners, that will allow us to look at every factor from departure to climb, cruise, descent, and arrival, in terms of our carbon emissions, demographics overflown, as well as things like procedure utilization, and that includes noise-reducing procedures. A lot of the work that we're doing to drive predictability will increase our ability to use noise-reducing procedures such as continuous descent. So it's a really exciting prospect for us. We're at the early stages. We know a lot of our partners in industry are super interested in what we're going to produce and the metrics we're going to have available to us, because a lot of it also has to do with things like on-time performance, reducing delays. These are concepts that are complementary to each other. So as we build this environment, this data environment, we'll be able to leverage them not only from a climate action perspective, but also an experience perspective for the passenger and so on. Initially, our goal in developing all those metrics will be within 100 nautical miles of our 4 major airports, which are Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal. Those are basically our hubs in Canada. So our initial goal will be to develop that capability around our 4 majors and expanding from there. So yeah, that's a summary of our framework for today. I do wish I brought a few items on the actual procedures that we're looking to implement, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense on how we're looking at building, changing our approach to planning operational initiatives and measuring them. I put a couple of contacts here from our team that are, this presentation was developed by our corporate performance and sustainability team. And so there's a couple of contacts there for folks that are interested. You can always contact me as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was a really comprehensive overview of all the actions that NAV Canada are taking, and a wonderful video as well. I actually found myself tapping my fingers to the music. So thank you for that. So we're going to open it up for the Q&A now. So please do send in your questions by Slido, and we will be able to go through those. But I think we're going to go around a full circle back to our first presenter to start with. We probably will aim questions at specific people, but of course the rest of the panel, if you do have thoughts or comments, please do feel free to jump in. So Kenley, going back to your presentation at the beginning, you gave us this really comprehensive overview of the measures that airlines can take. And you also did point out that there is no silver bullet solution, that, there's not going to be the one measure that solves everything. But sort of taking that from a different angle, what is the single most important thing that airlines can do right now to reduce their emissions and meet their or work towards the decarbonisation targets?
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, great. So thank you for the question. Obviously my presentation focused on SAF, so I think sitting here today, that's where we need the most partnership. I mentioned the importance of incentives, tax credits to ensure that this market takes off in a way that is really fundamental and shifts things towards SAF being widely available, increases the capacity, widely used. So I would have to focus on that as the key factor today.
Great, thank you. And glad to see you there. Dinesh, I have a question for you. We hear a lot about scientific uncertainty around contrails. And certainly there is a little bit of a polarized discussion in the UK. People are either Yeah, I'm on the Contrail bus, or I'm very much not on the Contrail bus. What are you doing to try and get rid of some of that uncertainty?
That's a great question. I will speak a bit, maybe I'll speak on behalf of the broader research community. I don't know if I'm the right person to do so, because this is not a question that Google Research will address. But zooming out, I think ultimately everyone who is working on contrails or any climate solution just want to ultimately deploy a solution that's climate beneficial. So there's uncertainty in almost all of these areas. So I think Ted had a nice bar chart, and each of those had error bars that are quite large. And the whole point of the research that has happened across the space is to settle those uncertainties. So we all should certainly acknowledge them, not shrink away from them, and then do our best to identify what research projects. So for Contrail specifically, we've done some experiments and research. Ted highlighted things he's done. There's many research labs looking at it. So I think that's really the goal, and a lot of funding and just energy is going into actually rigorously answering that question. So I think just address it head on and don't shrink from at the mention of uncertainty.
Thank you, Dinesh. Actually, I just wondered, Ted, did you have a view on uncertainty around contrails?
Yeah, I think just to build on what Dinesh was saying, I think it would be a disservice if we were to allow ourselves to kind of suffer from some analysis paralysis and say, oh, we're not going to take any action. There are uncertainties here, and let's wait until the uncertainties go away. Realistically, and there was a paper just in the last year on this very point saying that it's unrealistic to think that the uncertainties are going to be completely eliminated in the near term. But at this point, we do have scientific consensus that contrails, persistent contrails do on the net have a warming effect. And we do have the information to be able to start making some adjustments to flight trajectories in a way where we're not going to cause additional damage. And so now would be a good time to start putting some of those methods into practice while the research continues, and then we can sharpen the pencil as we go forward.
Thank you, Ted. That was really helpful. So I think perhaps building on that, a question perhaps primarily for Ted and Dinesh, but our other panelists may have thoughts of this as well. Can these approaches to manage contrails be done by a single airline, or is there a need to have a more widespread adoption plan? And that probably includes ATM and ATC as well. So I don't know, Ted, if you want to start that one, and then maybe we go around the panel.
Sure. I'd say there's nothing to prevent just one airline from taking advantage of that. Obviously you'll get a bigger effect if everybody's kind of on the same page. So, you could move your flight out of the way, kind of do the right thing, so to speak, not create the contrail, and then a flight directly behind you could stay at the other altitude and create the contrail in its place. So, but at least I guess it's one contrail instead of two that would have been created.
Thank you. I don't know, Dinesh, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or?
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is I think the important thing right now, so we get hypothetical questions a lot of, if we scale this climate solution, whether it's through an airline-focused part of planning, just include it as another cost layer in the planning process, whether it's a more ATC-driven operation of, I think there are some conversations in Europe even where there's questions of, should we just add tariffs to certain spaces based on upcoming policy? So there's all of these discussions, but I think to Ted's previous point, we really don't know yet. So I think the most valuable thing is just continued experimentation. So wherever we can test these things, whether it's an ATC-driven solution or an airline-driven solution, I think that's where we'll get a ton of value. And I think the long-term solution will be some combination of both.
Thank you, Dinesh. And I don't know, as the airlines and ATC are going to be the ones actually operationalizing these measures, I don't know if you want to add anything on how you view it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I agree with Dinesh about it kind of being relatively early, and so we don't really know the full extent of implementation, but certainly from an air traffic management perspective, it's part of what we're pursuing when we talk about trajectory-based operations, because it's about taking in a number of inputs and considering what the optimal profile is for an operator, considering all kinds of things like airspace capacity, airport capacity, weather. And so contrails becomes one of these factors, obviously a very important one, but it's one of many. So it doesn't, the goals there can't be separate from the broader inputs that influence how we direct traffic through airspace. So so definitely a role, what the role is, and who kind of leads it on the day, you know, obviously open-minded, but I think we'll have a key interest and role in how it gets rolled out.
And just to add to that, you know, I think Ted's slide that showed kind of the options and outcomes gives a lot of detail to the challenges that the airlines are facing. Is it that we avoid contrails, but now we're burning more fuel, also bringing the cost factor into that. So I can speak for our carriers and that they are tracking this very closely. They would love it if everyone was like, this is exactly what you have to do to achieve this, as Dinesh mentioned, like climate beneficial solution. That would be great, and I think we would all be on board.
Thank you for that. And it reminds me of a speech given by, I think it's Baroness Brown in the UK, who's a member of the Climate Change Committee, when she was in front of a whole load of academics who were saying, oh, there's a lot of uncertainty around contrails. We shouldn't be doing anything because there could be an additional ton of CO2. And you could sense her frustration to some extent. She was just saying, how certain do you need to be? You know, the planet is warming. And if this is an opportunity to stop or arrest that warming, then why shouldn't we should be going after it? I'm really worried that you've obviously piqued people's interest, panel, because the questions are flooding in and there's no way we're going to get through all of them. So I'm sorry if you've asked a question, we don't get to your question. I apologize for that. So we've been talking about trade-offs between kind of CO2 and contrails. And it feels like there's a real consensus there that action needs to be taken. Can we talk about a different trade-off? So I'm going to ask you, Jonathan. You talked a bit about noise and CO2 and needing to work in both of those spaces around the airports, the main hubs in Canada. How do you approach the community when you're talking about those difficult trade-offs that may exist between noise and CO2?
That's a really great question. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I guess there's a few factors. First, obviously, I think being transparent about those trade-offs and open about them, having them well quantified. I'd say from our experience that you know, it's not necessarily like the same interest groups. You know, I think there's a lot of communities that would trade off efficiency for less noise in a heartbeat, and are willing to say, yeah, have that plane go further because it's affecting my life, and even if it's going to burn more fuel and have an impact on the environment. So it is not necessarily not every, you know, and then there's situations where those things are compatible, right? Continuous descent operations can be quieter. It doesn't mean the plane's not making noise. It's not a silver bullet, but it certainly reduces noise as well as emissions. So there's things where that aligns. So for me, the main thing I would say is, you know, full quantification and coming to the community, also understanding the experience of the community, against those factors, and, you know, proactive engagement on the topic.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I'd like to bring it back again to SAF, I think, because we're talking a lot about contrails, and I understand that SAF can, in some cases, actually help to reduce contrails as well. So we really need to, we've heard, we need to ramp up SAF production. So perhaps a question for Kenley, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to producing more SAF?
Well, I think right now, one of the biggest obstacles is just the investment itself. So, you know, the oil industry is very well established. It likes to have very clear understanding of investment, demand, supply. So bringing something new online, I think just there's a little bit of human nature where uncertainty just kind of lacks the de-risking necessary for additional investment. In terms of SAF itself, and Dinesh, you may have some more details on this, but there are instances where SAF has a lower particulate matter output, which also can play into the development of contrails. So that's another factor where we're kind of seeing the interplay between different options here. So Dinesh, I think you've spoken to us about this before.
Yeah. And maybe it would be helpful to talk about other longer term solutions altogether in relation to contrails. So I think scaling SAF, alternative propulsion, there are a lot of studies that, for example, hydrogen combustion may also, for similar reasons, lead to lower formation and ultimately warming from contrails. But I think, to your first point, I think it's an all of the above approach. So I think the timescales are really different, where scaling SAF is a very hard problem. Alternative propulsion is a very hard problem, and we're talking about, you know, decades for this to roll out. So I think there's that time horizon, and I think there's a time horizon of years where, you know, as the science and the uncertainty and experimentation continues, where a contrail avoidance regime might be possible. But there's definitely interactions between the two. So I think it's super interesting, and we'll see what happens over the next couple of years, because it's certainly become a topic of interest for manufacturers, OEMs, on what is the contrail effect of SAF, alternative combustion, all these things. But it's really early, and there's more research to be done. Excellent.
Really, really good discussion. I can't not ask this question. I love it. So it's going to probably be for Ted and Dinesh again, actually. How can AI accelerate or help the FAA design new flight procedures that reduce noise impact for overflight communities? No pressure. So you've already told us that you can discern between chihuahuas and blueberry muffins with artificial intelligence, but got any ideas on noise solutions that might be found in that magic AI box?
So I don't have anything off the top of my mind for noise specifically, but maybe I'll mention the one or two things that, again, we're learning. So I like to think of our team as kind of machine learning, AI experts, and then we like partnering with people that understand aviation and all the complexities a lot more than us. So if I say something that's silly, please forgive me. So two other areas, I don't have anything for noise, but two areas that others have already started exploring is just from this is more of the ATM perspective of just next generation optimization and management. So there's a role that AI could play there. And another one that's really interesting is helping with all vectors of communication. So it turns out that we're getting pretty good at transcribing verbal cues into written text on a screen at very high fidelities. So There are lots of experiments going on there. But if you have ideas, please do reach out. You can think of us as a hammer always looking for for nails. So if you have ideas on noise, let me know. Ted, I don't know if you have a better direct answer.
I think Dinesh answered that very well. You know, AI alone is probably not going to be the only way to solve this. You know, it is a useful hammer for doing an analysis of large amounts of data. And there's certainly a lot of information to go through to try to come up with that fully optimized solution that's going to do the balancing of the noise and the emissions and everything. And part of that is going to come back to the discussions that we've had yesterday and today in terms of making it really clear what the ultimate objective is going to be. You know, what is the problem that you want it to solve?
Thank you very much. So unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time slot. We do have a lot of questions that we haven't been able to ask, unfortunately, but our panelists will be around if you want to catch up with them during the break. So I think that was a really interesting session. I think we learned a lot about the various measures that the different stakeholders in the aviation sector are taking to tackle the problems of decarbonisation. And certainly I think the potential of AI is really exciting for reducing both emissions and noise. So there's a lot of positivity going forward. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists for their really informative presentations and good discussions, and my co-chair Ian for all the good work in preparing and running this panel. Thank you, everybody.